This is SSN.
Story Studio Network.
Hi, my name is Pamela Fuselli, and I'm the host of Popping the Bubble Wrap. Are you the person in your family who worries about the safety of others, about buying safety products and using them? Are you yelling, "Yes, that's me"? This is the podcast for you. Raising a child or children can be a hair-raising undertaking, and keeping them safe is a priority. Parachute's Popping the Bubble Wrap podcast explores what you really need to think about as a parent or caregiver, and provides easy tips on prevention strategies. No bubble wrap here, though. You did it. You've guided your kid through childhood successfully, and they've made it to adolescence safe and sound. They're at the age now where they can get their license and start driving for the first time, and a whole new challenge is on the horizon. This can be a scary time as a parent and as a young driver. We know well the dangers of driving under the influence. Add to that the fact that almost everybody today is rarely without a cell phone, and we have a lot to navigate about road safety. In this episode, I'll be talking to two parents and a young driver about the issue of road safety and strategies to stay safe on the road. Thanks for joining me today, Brad, Dawn, and Shiv. Thanks for being part of Parachute's Popping the Bubble Wrap podcast.
Of course.
Thank you for having us.
Super. I'm looking forward to this conversation. Shiv, maybe I'll start with you as our young driver. Thank you for being brave and coming on to talk to us about this issue. What are your concerns with your own driving, but also with other people on the road and your friends?
Yeah, so personally with me, I guess I've been really lucky that my father was a bus driver, so he was really, acquainted with driving, and I was taught from the very beginning of the basics of driver safety and more importantly, defensive driving, which I think is not taught enough. And, that really gave me the idea that when you're on the road, it's not about just controlling your driving, but it's also about reacting to other people's driving, which really made me more cautious. Simple things such as going slower, not only is it safer, but it gives you more time to react. Mm-hmm. So, instead of, rushing to school or to get a cup of coffee from Tim's, just taking that extra time, really, it might take you 2 extra minutes, but it's really the difference between a mistake and not. So I think, with the aspect of risky driving behavior that I really noticed, it's mostly just, being sure that you control your own driving and have enough time to react.
I think people believe that it will take them more time if they have to drive a little bit slower, or if they get caught at red lights, that it's going to extend their drive time so much when it's really only seconds.
Yeah, exactly. And I noticed that sometimes you see those drivers that, cut you off and go blazing by, and then 2 minutes later, you're stuck at the same red light anyways. So, they really just wasted gas and saved no time. So definitely going slower is worth it in the long run.
Yeah, you're so right. When I used to commute into the office, I'd notice that even on the highway driving, where people would try to get by, and then, I'd just be driving, the speed limit, and or they'd be weaving in and out of traffic trying to get ahead. And then all of a sudden you'd be like, oh, there they are right there. They're not that far ahead. So it's absolutely true. You just have that perception of it, right?
Yeah, exactly. You feel that speed and that adrenaline, which many people go after. But at the end of the day, you got to look at the cost and what that can really result in and whether or not it's really worth it. Yeah,
absolutely. Dawn, tell me about what your concerns are around your young driver. I think it's your daughter, correct? That's the young driver in your family?
Yes. Well, I have two, a 16-year-old and a 14-year-old daughter. And the 14-year-old is actually riding scooters now. And the 16-year-old is actually taking her course and starting to drive now. I was a professional driver with the military. So like Shiv, his parents did all the defensive driving lessons with them prior to. That's basically what we did as well. One of our main concerns with both of them actually is tailgating and road rage. Because of, for the scooters, they're only allowed to have a maximum of 50 cc's. So going on the road, my 14-year-old can only go a maximum of 70 kilometers an hour. So everybody is tailgating, trying to get around her, pushing her off towards the ditch. That's a big concern for us. And the 16-year-old it's more trying to make sure that the cell phone is put away while she's driving, so there's no distraction whatsoever. And if we see that there is an issue, there's always an adult nearby. So that's one of the bonuses for us.
So, Brad, you have a young driver in your house, and you've actually been through this with two other drivers as well. Tell us a bit about your concerns or your experience even. I mean, have things changed from when your first son went, through young drivers and, became a new driver to your current son?
Yeah, I'm not sure how much things have changed. I think certainly what's changed over the past 10 years is just the pervasiveness of distracted driving. And I think we know how married young people are to their cell phones and smartphones. And I don't think they even understand how much they're using their phones when they're driving. And with all of these distracted drivers, and of course adults also fall into that category, what worries me is that there are just so many drivers on the road that are not paying attention. And I really like Shiv's point around defensive driving. I think the need for defensive driving is more important now than ever, because there are so many people on the road who are not paying attention to what they're doing. And as a result, they're putting other drivers at risk.
Yeah. And how much do you think your sons have watched you as a role model?
I think modeling is huge.
Yeah.
They watch, no question. And that, of course, does not just extend to how I drive, but our kids watch us and they watch everything that we do, from how we treat others to how we behave in social settings. And so it is incredibly important, I think, for parents to show proper modeling when they're driving, which includes not being distracted, first and foremost, not using their cell phones, using their signals, obeying the speed limits, and kids will follow. And I try and do it all the time, but I am especially conscious of being a very safe and defensive driver when my kids are in the car.
Shiv, is that your experience with your friends even? Are they watching what their parents are doing? I mean, I think a lot of parents would say they don't. Their kids don't watch them at all, don't pay attention at all. Is that your experience that kids they're watching their parents and more than their parents might think they are?
Yeah, I'd definitely say they're watching, and I'd say they're watching even more when you're doing the wrong thing. And, that's one thing that I really noticed. When I would see, like older role model, especially not my dad, but, someone else, and they would be, picking up their phone or going over the speed limit, that sort of, validates it internally, like, oh, if they can do it, I can do it. And you don't really consider as like, like a child that's just learning how to drive about, the experience they have and how much they've really done to be able to do that. But at the same time, they shouldn't really be doing that. And that's where the problem starts from. But again, when you see others do the right thing, you are more motivated to do it. But again, when you see them do the wrong thing, the motivation goes even higher. So I think watching is definitely a big factor.
So how have you been in any situations where your friends, you as a passenger have been, watching them do something risky, and what are the conversations with your friends about, becoming new drivers, and are they eager to become drivers, or has that changed at all? Like, are there less interest in getting their driver's license?
I think there's a lot of factors that come into play, but speaking from personal experience, driving for me was something I was extremely excited to, really do. Whether it's, looking at movies like Fast and Furious, where they're doing all those cool things with cars, or just the freedom that you get, the freedom to go to school, to go to work, to, just get food whenever you want. There's so many things that are associated with, driving, and that's why people rush as fast as possible to do that. And then while doing that, if you don't have, the right support system in place that ensures you're ready to drive, you might start driving when you're not ready. And that is probably one of the biggest problems I even saw in my local community, where there are, multiple G1 drivers or G1 drivers that didn't even have their G1 and no insurance, but they're out, driving, and not only driving, but committing like actual crimes while driving, speeding, like dangerous driving, stunt driving, all those things. So I think having the support system and having the right friends around you really, alters that perspective.
Dawn, in your daughter's friends group, is it a big thing to get your license? Are they waiting to get their license, or?
No, they're very anxious to have that opportunity as well. So I don't know, here they have graduated licensing, and basically they don't get their full license until 2 years.
Right.
Which I think is a great idea. That kind of lets them get more experience under the belt before they go out on their own.
Yeah, we've seen a real impact on that graduated driver's license because of the restrictions at the time of day and how many people in the car. And that really has addressed some of the risk factors that we saw before graduated driver's license was introduced, where, the more kids in the car, the more people in the car, the higher the risk of a crash. What are some of your strategies around, you talked about being a professional driver. How did you talk to your kids about, driving safely? And did they have questions like about your professional driving experience and were they interested in learning, tips that you could give to them?
Well, for ourselves, before they were even able to get into the vehicle and start driving, they had to know the components of the vehicle, how to change a tire, how to take a tire off. Basically, we taught them their oil, their battery, everything we possibly could. And then we graduated into sitting into the car, checking out the position of your seat, the mirrors. One of the big things that we just went through was she started looking at the backup camera. And I had a big issue with that. So I put a magazine over it so I could see how she was backing up, but she couldn't use the camera.
Oh, interesting.
Just to get her used to using the mirrors in case there's a vehicle that she doesn't have that opportunity to use the camera.
Well, and the vehicles say, don't rely solely on the backup camera, but it is an aid that certainly wasn't available when I was learning to drive, or even the first quite number of years that I was driving. So things have changed. Brad, have you known about any risky behavior that your kids? All three of them that are now drivers, and have you had to have a conversation with them, or how did you approach sort of talking to them about being a driver and the responsibilities of that?
Well, I think, again, I think it started with modeling, but we had a very stern conversation because they don't have their own vehicle. So whenever they would be driving, they would typically be driving my vehicle. I have a large vehicle. I have a large SUV. So it really spoke to the need when you're driving a large vehicle to be even more careful. There's also an interesting setting, which I've used on my vehicle called Teen Driver. It's on my vehicle, it's a GMC vehicle, and you can actually use the key fob to do things like put a maximum on speed limit. It can lower the driver volume of the car. It can do a number of things. It's certainly not a be-all. It also won't let the car be put into drive or reverse without buckling the seatbelt. So there are a few little settings. It's a little bit cumbersome to use, to be honest, but there are little things like that. And then it will send messages back to me. So I would encourage people to look in their owner's manuals. Most cars actually now do have something called a teen driver or a young driver setting. Learn how to use it if you do have young drivers in the family, and program the settings accordingly. And that will give you a sense of how your teens are driving in the vehicle, even if you're not in the vehicle with them.
That's really interesting. It's a good kind of combination of technology that's helping to mitigate some of the issues when they get to the point where they can drive on their own. Sometimes it's just a reminder that they need that sort of prompt at the moment of them making a decision one way or the other, in terms of any of us really, of we kind of know the right things to do, but sometimes we need that reminder at the time to say, yeah, hey, this isn't worth the risk. Shiv, what kind of advice would you have for parents who are either have young drivers in their home right now, or have the 14, 15-year-olds that are going to be young drivers soon, what kind of advice would you give to parents as a young driver yourself?
I think that every parent really knows what safe driving is all about, and obviously each parent wants the best for their children. So the knowledge is obviously there, but I think the one thing that makes the most difference is communication. Like Brad mentioned, before he even talked about, the safety features in his car, he talked about that stern conversation and he talked about modeling. And I feel like that's where it starts from. When you start with positive communication grounds, and then you talk about this is why we have a driver safety program in the car that enables, limited speeds, then they actually understand, why this is being imposed and why my parents are, trying to control my driving. What's really the goal here? Rather than if you just, start with that and start with poor communication, like, oh yeah, take the car wherever you want, but this and this, you can't go that fast. It really just, ticks them off and like, oh, my dad, my mom, they're controlling me. But when you actually like explain the whole, context behind it, it honestly makes sense and it's not really that big of a deal. At the end of the day, you're getting that vehicle and you're getting the benefit of it's pretty much impossible for you to make a mistake because the car is helping you become a better driver. So I think the main really advice that I can have for parents is just communicating it the right way and starting off on the right grounds, because at the end of the day, it's much more than, just driving safe, but it's your life at the line. So you want to make sure that they understand how important this situation is.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the time that when you have a young driver, they're preparing to become a driver, I think you start to pay more attention to those issues, because as a driver who's been driving for 10, 20 years, you do what you do and you don't think about it. And I think having conversations around the time when their kids are starting to drive brings them back to that, oh yeah, this is a very powerful motor vehicle that, you have the privilege of driving, and it's not a right. And, there are lots of good things you can do. And there's lots of trouble that you can get into with, even a couple of seconds of inattention or just that devil may care, I'm just going to go and, and do that. And the thing is, the cars these days, I mean, they go up to like 200, 240 kilometers on the speedometer. And you think, why do they make cars that go that fast or potentially could go that fast? And then you get into that fast and furious sort of headspace. It's like, oh, well, open road. Let's see what this car can do. And so it sort of sends a message that this vehicle can go that fast. Dawn, do you see a difference between, your daughter or daughters and any of their male friends? Do you see a difference in the way that they approach being drivers at all?
I think the male species or gender try to, they like speed a lot. I don't see much with my daughter. Mm-hmm. But I find the males like to have the little race cars that makes a lot of noise, even if it's not very fast. So make sure the muffler gives it off that great sound and scares half of the people around them. But as far as habits and whatnot, I haven't seen any that are pertinent. No. Yeah.
The peer, I think that, the next group of influencers in our lives other than our family are our peers or our friends. And, I think, Shiv, you've talked about this a little bit about, the impact that you can have from a parent perspective, but also as a peer, and role modeling and sort of holding people to account in terms of what their behaviors are. I want to thank all three of you for joining me today on the podcast. It's been really interesting conversation. The perspective from both parents and young drivers has been really valuable. So thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Got a young driver in your family? Check out our resources through our National Teen Driver Safety Week program at parachute.ca/NTDSW. That's parachute.ca/NTDSW.
It's time to open your parachute.
Valerie Smith is the Director of Programs at Parachute and oversees all of our road safety campaigns, programs, and network of community partners across Canada. Thanks for joining me, Val, on this episode of Popping the Bubble Wrap.
Thanks so much for having me, Pam. Happy to be here.
So, Val, young drivers make up a disproportionate number of those that are seriously injured or killed in collisions. And you do a lot of work in this area. What are some of the factors that contribute to why this is the case?
Absolutely. We know that road crashes are the third leading cause of death amongst young people 15 to 24 in Canada. And there are a number of variables that really help to form those numbers. First of all, I think one of the biggest pieces is that young people are still learning how to drive. They're still learning how to navigate different driving situations. We also know, and this is a really big piece, that their cognitive, physical, and social skills are still developing. And that really connects to so many variables. Developmental research tells us that young drivers don't always understand the consequences of their actions because of the idea that their brain is still developing. They're not necessarily making well-grounded decisions and judgments because the brain is still developing until about the age of 25. So because of this immaturity, both physically and mentally, youth are more likely to take risks. So we find more youth are speeding, making poor decisions behind the wheel, like tailgating, distracted driving, having more kids, more young people in the cars than they're allowed. So this coupled with an overall lack of driving experience, throw in some peer pressure, throw in norms around young people wanting to be accepted by their friends, and caving to friends who want to play the music really loud or want to get to that party and have a few drinks. This all really increases the likelihood that younger drivers are going to be involved in more crashes.
Yeah, and you talked about the peer pressure. Parents will think that their kids are not watching what they do or are even respecting what their wishes are, what they're role modeling. But that is, in fact, not true, right?
Yeah, absolutely. In all areas of the work we do in injury prevention, we know that young people do actually look to their parents and their caregivers as role models. And so as a parent, if you are assuming that your poor decisions are not impacting your teenager or even a preteen driver, a preteen who will become a driver, then you are absolutely incorrect. Everything we do as parents and caregivers is impacting our teens. I have a 13-year-old daughter, and I often think she doesn't. She isn't noticing what I'm doing, and then we always hear about it later. They are, and so we really do, as parents, we really need to be aware of how we are contributing to our future young drivers.
Yeah, I think that's an important message for parents to know that even if they don't think they are, they actually are watching them, and that they, along with their peer group, are the ones that are going to influence their behaviors the most. You talked about the number of kids in the car, and we know that at different times of day, there is a higher risk of a collision when people are young or inexperienced drivers. And so the graduated driver's license really was built around some of those concepts to try to mitigate some of the risk factors, like, having to have a licensed driver in the car with you, not being able to drive during certain hours, limiting the number of people in the vehicle with a young driver to reduce the distractions and things like that. And we've seen a good or a positive impact, I guess, on some of the driving behaviors, but it still is obviously a big concern for us with young drivers on the roads. Tell me about some of the programs that are designed to address these issues with young drivers, to raise awareness about road safety.
There are a lot of great campaigns and awareness programs aimed at making the roads safer for young drivers and making young drivers safer on the roads. And we've seen programs come and go in Canada and United States, all around the world. what we're really striving to really find is, how do we really connect and influence the behavior of young people? Because we can continue to do these education and awareness raising programs without success. So at Parachute, what we've really been trying to do is work with our partners across the country to find out what is that game changer in terms of helping young people make better decisions behind the wheel. We've been very lucky at Parachute not only to have great partners in Canada, but also we've had access to the Canadian Youth Road Safety Council at Parachute. And this program was developed about a year ago, and it's made up of close to 20 young Canadians from diverse backgrounds and all across Canada. We've really looked to this youth council to help us identify what are the important issues and trends affecting young people, as well as to help us critique what are some of the current road safety programs that are happening, that Parachute might have done, that other organizations might have done that need to be better. So the youth councils really helped us with looking at these programs, what's working, what's not working. How do we design programs so we can really reach youth and help to drive that behavioral change? They have been so important in the work we have done. And they've really helped us figure out some of these key approaches and messages that we need to be doing to reach youth.
Yeah, and Shiv, one of our panelists for this episode is one of our youth council members, and he was excellent in being able to articulate some of the things that he sees in his peer group. And we often think about negative consequences like tickets and license suspensions and things like that. Some of the work that you've been leading is around some positive outlooks and a positive approaches, like the positive ticketing activities that we've been doing with young people in their own communities. Can you tell me a bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. So I think the positive language you used is so key to all the work we're doing and hoping to do further. So we know, just to give some context, we know that fear-based and traumatic messaging can often be counterproductive. The research has told us that, and that's because that kind of traumatic messaging and content can actually trigger defensive reactions and encourage young people to reject the messages they're getting around road safety. And because of that, Parachute over the years has really looked to take a positive approach to the way we talk to young people. And so not only in our campaigns and our messaging, but in our community approaches. So the positive ticketing that you spoke of is an amazing campaign that we run each year during National Teen Driver Safety Week. And it allows us to work with youth groups at high schools closely as well with police. It really encourages an open and friendly dialogue between the authorities, who have typically been seen in a darker light when it comes to how their interactions might be processed by young people. So instead of giving tickets that result in penalties to young people as they're coming into school on driving behaviors, we actually talk to them about the great things they're doing to keep themselves and their friends safe. The young people and the youth groups take part in the program. They work with their peers. They come up with the messaging, and they roll it out in their high schools. And it's all just how do we take a less authoritative approach to talking to each other and to other young people about road safety and road behavior.
Yeah, I think it's a really great approach in rewarding young drivers in their behaviors of what they should be doing and reinforcing that and making that more acceptable. What you've talked about in terms of our young drivers, I mean, we want them to get home safe and we want them to be able to go out and have fun and, go to school and go to their part-time jobs and have fun with their friends and do it all over again. That's the whole goal. And driving a motor vehicle is, such a can be such a dangerous activity, but we do it over and over again daily in some cases, and nothing happens. And so we become complacent. So I think talking about these important things about not only, the physical and cognitive development of kids all the way to the age of 25 is really important message for parents to hear. And some of the roles that they play is so essential. So thanks for joining me today and sharing that information. Really important.
No problem. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. Popping the Bubble Wrap is a podcast of Parachute, Canada's national injury prevention charity, whose mission is for Canadians to live long lives to the fullest by preventing serious and fatal injuries. We release episodes every 2 weeks. Next episode, we'll be talking about water safety. Help us reach parents and caregivers by sharing this link with your friends and family and giving us a 5-star review wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Popping the Bubble Wrap is produced for Parachute by Story Studio Network and Eye Contact Productions.
This is Story Studio Network.